This is Dennis Ramundi. I'm here with my co-host, Phil Goldberg, author of American Veda. Our podcast, Spirit Matters, found at spiritmatterstalk.com. Our focus, contemporary spirituality, and our guest today, Reverend Elizabeth Stookey and Noel Paul Stookey. I should say they've been married over 50 years. They're in Blue Hill, Maine right now as we speak to them. And they run a non-profit, I assume, which focuses on multi-faith as opposed to interfaith. We want to talk about that. One light, many candles, a multi-faith program. Thank you so very much for taking the time to come on with us today.
You're very welcome. Should be fun.
It will be. This is actually the first time we have two guests simultaneously, and none of us can see each other, so we hope that the conversation goes smoothly. Let's begin. You came to our attention because of your program, One Light, Many Candles, through a mutual friend. And we were intrigued, and we wondered if you'd begin by giving us your backgrounds and what brought you to what's the sort of creation story of One Light, Many Candles?
Well, I think I'll start first. I think that it began when we were invited to Wesley Seminary in Washington, D.C. After I had graduated from Harvard Divinity School. We went there for 4 months as the artist in residence and a minister in residence. And part of our contract was that I would do a presentation to the faculty there. And I had no idea. First of all, I was scared to death because these are all the folks whose books I read when I was at divinity school. And they're all very, very intellectual and very smart and very kind and wonderful, too. But anyway, after much pondering, I figured that the only thing I really cared about was that cared enough about to make a presentation was to talk about how we could all get together, people of various religions and differences, how we could come together and stop killing each other over what we believe in, because basically we believe in the same core, which is love of every religion. So I gave that presentation. That did not include Noel at the time. And then I think the next one was we worked up a program together of readings and music that alternate. And so Noel does about 10 songs. And then the next one, I think, was in Brooksville, Maine. It was kind of a tryout. And it went pretty well. So that's how it all began, and that's how it all got together. Is that enough information?
Oh, yeah, that's a great background.
Let's hear Noel's side of it.
Yeah, well, I had undergone a great spiritual confrontation in the early 70s and changed my whole scope of writing, following the wedding song, There Is Love, and a lot of other songs about searching for spirituality. I recognized that most of my writing from there on out was going to be about that subject material. So when my distant cousin, Larry Stookey, who was a professor at Wesley Theological, asked Betty and I down, I think it was in part because he had seen that change in my music. And, to the extent that I've tried to speak to the intersection of faith and politics, I think the music is still very current and contemporary, though the style is certainly folk music. And Betty's capacity to draw from both contemporary and archived writings of a multiplicity of faiths ties in well to the metaphors that are used often in my music.
Mm-hmm.
And we should state that Noel was the Paul of Peter, Paul, and Mary, hence his reference to Wedding Song, which is probably your best known song, I would think. Is that true?
As a soloist, certainly, I think that's probably been at many weddings.
Good.
I want to say that I've always found your music and the music of Peter, Paul, and Mary very spiritually enlivening, even though at the time I was listening to it, I might not have thought of it that way, but certainly it was. And a question for you, Elizabeth. You've been married, I think, the two of you, for 63 years. I mean, over 50 years, since 1963. I don't want to rush things. And,
4 years.
and so through much of that period of time, when Noel was with Peter, Paul, and Mary and traveling, were you both in, and I think you've raised three daughters, were you engaged in ministry? When did that spiritual impulse take you to becoming a reverend?
Oh, I think it started when I was about 13, and just I had a dream that made me very sure that God was with me, and but I think mostly it was questioning that led me to the divinity school, because I have a really broad view of who God is, and I do believe that all religions are true, as Mahatma Gandhi said. So it was difficult for me to focus on one, and I really went to divinity school to ask a lot of questions, some of which got answered and some of which didn't.
Elizabeth, could you tell us about that dream?
Oh, okay. I was 12, I think, or 13, somewhere in there, and I dreamt that I walked into a very large all-white room with two steps that led down that were carpeted in white, and two couches facing each other that were white, and a fireplace in between that was white, and this statue on the top of the fireplace, which I didn't know then, but later found out that it was Buddha. I recognized it once I knew. I didn't then know what Buddha was. And over to my right was this huge wall-to-wall curtain, also white. And as I stepped down into the room, I heard this beautiful voice saying, "This is all yours." And the curtain opened, and it showed the whole world. And I just felt like I had been given a gift. And I knew that it was from God, and that I was going to be okay. It was a great dream.
And when did you finally find it possible to go to divinity school? Is that a later in life decision?
Yes, much later, because I had three daughters to raise, and Noel was gone a fair amount, so it kind of fell to me to do most of that. And I was running a flower business and teaching at the local school, teaching French, and very, very busy. But when the girls all left, I went, oh, haha, I have some time now. What am I going to do? And several friends said, you should go to divinity school. And I kind of scoffed, because I'd never considered myself a religious person in that way. And yet it didn't leave me alone. This is another story. Do you want another story?
Sure, absolutely.
I kept thinking about it, and a friend of ours, Bob Massey, who was then at the divinity school at Harvard, said, "Betty, you should apply. You should apply." So I went home and I applied, and I thought, well, I won't get in because it's been 30 years since I've been in school, and I have 3 cats and a huge house to take care of, and I just can't do it. So needless to say, I got accepted, and
then the cats died.
well, you're right. Story.
What year?
Come on.
What year were you at the divinity school?
Yeah, you said that. So we went away on a trip, Noel and I, together, and when we came back, one of the cats had run away, and the other 2 were gone. We didn't know where, and there went one of my reasons for not going to divinity school. And then our daughter came to me and said, "Mom, can I live at home next year because I want to work in town?" And there went the second excuse, the big house. So I figured that was a pretty big message, and I should listen to it. So I went, kind of kicking and screaming, but it was an absolutely wonderful experience. Really, really wonderful.
Elizabeth, what year were you at the divinity school?
I was there from 1993 to 1997.
And you were ordained in the United. You were ordained in the United Church of Christ. Did you ever run a congregation, or did you step into? No.
When I graduated, I immediately got the job as chaplain at Northfield Mount Hermon School, and that was really an amazing place to be. And I was there for 8 years, and then finally left.
Mm-hmm.
And I have not taken it.
Yeah. Nolan's in a big transition and adjustment for you to go from, and I assume you still perform, but going from really being on tour, being with Peter, Paul, and Mary, to a life that was less maybe directly involved with music and more involved with spirituality and working with your wife in ministry.
Well, when Betty and I moved to Maine in 1974, part of the purpose that we both understood, sometimes wordlessly, because we don't always talk about, we love the fact that we discovered that we're thinking the same, but we don't always air these things out, hence the comment about the cats dying before she wanted to tell you about the great coincidence. But in that spirit, when we came to Maine, we both felt that we were going to be able to bring a certain peace and tranquility to our lives that was just not available with the fame of Peter, Paul, and Mary and living in an urban environment like New York or near New York City. So the schedule was greatly reduced when I came to Maine. But I got to tell you, and Betty's heard me say this before, I loved going with her as the chaplain's husband to Northfield.
Oh, I loved it because for once I was the deal and he was the chaplain's husband, literally, and it was just terrific.
I was the occasional organ monkey in the church. I would, she would wind me up and I would sing for the kids. I had very transitory duties, but honestly, Betty, when I confess to you, listen, I don't know if you got my glee in it. All of the times when I had disappointed Betty because I had to stay over for a rehearsal, I was in town for a recording session, the plane was late, all of these things that had kept me from being connected with Betty as a husband in our life. Now the situation was reversed because Betty would call and say, I can't make it home for dinner. I've got a student council meeting. So it was a great leveling, and Betty and I think discovered joyfully a kind of equity of participation in our relationship.
That's great. Noel, when you and Paul and Mary, Peter and Mary were at the height of the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War, you guys were sort of the voice, along with other people, of those movements for many years, and at the forefront, famously at the Dr. King's 1963 event in Washington and other things. In those years, when politics were in the forefront of your minds and changing the world was a priority, was there a spiritual dimension to all that? Were you conscious of it?
Not for me. I was really hungry for it, though, I can tell in retrospect. I kept looking for the reason for being involved politically, because this was an ethic I had inherited through the music, and not anything that was in. It was much more history through the music and through the people who were in folk music, like Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger and Cisco Houston and Josh White. This was an ethic that I had inherited, but I didn't own yet. And that became kind of a search for me. Well, what motivates people to give of themselves this way and to care so much about the world around them? So I was really a Johnny-come-lately, but by the time 1970 rolled around, I had prayed enough that I think the answer, when it came, was more easily recognized by me.
Right. Reverend, I read that you changed the name from word interfaith to multi-faith. What do you see as the difference between those two? Why did you do that?
Well, that's another story. When I was working as chaplain at Northfield Mount Hermon School, we had a large group of Muslim students there, but they wouldn't come to the interfaith, I called it then, services that I held every month. And I asked them why, and their reason was that they felt that if they came to hear other people talk about their faith, that their own faith would become blended. So we talked about that, and we figured that multi-faith sort of exemplified each faith standing strong in its own beliefs, not blending, but open and ready to listen to someone else without fear of losing the strength of your own religion. So that was good, but we had a lot more to learn. I guess that's really the core of why it became multi-faith.
Mm-hmm.
And let's turn to the One Light, Many Candles programs that you do. Can you describe it and what takes place during the program?
Well, very simply put, it's a program of readings and music that reflect the diversity and integrity of an individual faith while seeking a global spiritual community. So it's a multi-faith program in word and song, and I do readings from Martin Luther King and Gandhi and Buddha and many, many others. And in between the readings, Noel does one of his wonderful songs, his own songs, and it lasts about an hour and a half. And we've traveled all over with it. The response has been quite remarkable. I think even, especially now, today, people are more in need of that kind of a message of that we really can love each other despite our differences.
And what kind of venues do you do them in?
Oh, golly, well, we've done them in seminaries, synagogues, churches, schools, really whoever asks us, if it's within reason. Yeah.
We'll have all that information posted up as well for people that would like to follow up on that. A question for both of you. You're both multi-talented and have succeeded in many areas. And one area that I absolutely have to ask you about is your success at marriage. You've been together for over 50 years, obviously working well together. What's your secret? And I throw that out to both of you.
You go first, Noel.
That's the secret.
Yeah.
Well, you got that right in a way.
That's right. Yes, deference plays a very high role in our relationship.
For both of us.
For both of us. We are very mindful and respectful. Although I think Betty, just by the nature of my often gregarious personality and the role that I've taken in the world of music, makes me use a lot of words to get to the same point that she gets to much more quickly. So many times I will start a situation that really could have been handled much better by Betty in fewer words and fewer moments. But it is the give and take. And honestly, I think if there was one word that described why we're still together, it's surprise. Because we're not at all alike. When we discover things that we mutually hold dear, it's like falling in love again. We go, oh, well, that's why we love each other. Oh, and so therefore, that which we bring to our relationship, when it's unexpected, invariably, while it may appear to be a challenge initially, becomes another form of bonding.
But I also think that laughter is a big part of it. I mean, Noel can make me laugh. He can get me off my dime when I'm in a snit by making me laugh, and that is such a gift, such a gift. So I think that's another important thing. But mostly the give and take. You just have to give up on your stuff when it isn't really that important. When it is important, then we built a house together and we made a deal that whoever cared the most, whoever's idea was so important to them, that person would get to do what they wanted to do, even if the other person didn't agree. So that that worked well. I think we had 2 items like that, or 3,
or 4 or 5.
or 5. Yeah.
And that could translate into multi-faith gatherings, I would think, when people come together.
Between men and women are incredible.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely amazed that we've been together for 54 years. I mean, I just I look back on who I was and who Noel was when we were 20, and it's like, who were those?
Yeah.
I think a certain amount of patience is called for, too, because you can have passion and a confrontation, and then the next morning you can still have passion, but probably a little less confrontation because you've had time to mull it over. And by the time the third day comes around, you go, relatively speaking, it's not that important to me. And if it still is to the other person, then that's the direction you need to go.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Great advice.
When you do the One Light Many Candles programs, what do you find people's experiences? Do you find people transformed? Do they learn from their exposure to the people of other paths?
All of that. We have people coming up and saying that it changed their lives. Some people are in tears. They talk a lot lately about how important the message is today. It's really, really remarkable to us to see the depth to which the program touches people. It's really amazing.
I agree. And my contribution, because it's less specific than Betty's. I mean, Betty draws, she's drawing on the words of Black Elk and Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. These are specific words that are part of our history, our shared history. To introduce the concept of metaphor into the circumstance by virtue of this music means that everybody gets to reinterpret what they just heard specifically in broader terms. And I think that's part of what helps it move along.
Right.
Yeah, we kind of organized it so that whatever my reading at the time was talking about, Noel's music kind of lifts up that thought in a really lovely way.
Right.
And also I do like a Muslim prayer, a Jewish prayer, and a Christian prayer, just to show the similarities in the religions in that particular instance.
Right.
Trying to have people understand that really we are not different. It's just a hard message to get across.
Right. When somebody comes to your an event and perhaps is deeply inspired, and they come to you afterwards and say, I got dragged here by a friend. I was never really a spiritual person. Now I'm feeling very inspired. And they ask you, how do I continue to be inspired? What can I do to maintain this spirituality and really grow spiritually from here?
That is a really good question, because I think that one thing our program is lacking is a follow-up workshop. And that's an excellent question. We really do not address that well. And when people come back after the performance, there are many, many people and very little time. So we don't actually get into the personal aspects of it, but I think we should, don't you know?
Well, it's funny, honey, because I think personal recognizance plays into this. There's a line in one of the songs from the program called Revolution that says, "But we are a raggle-taggle army, got no uniform or guns. Still, we've been called by coincidence. So maybe we're the ones to take this revolution to the street." But it's speaking about a spiritual revolution, and what it does, I would hope, as a songwriter I intended it to, give each member of the audience the instruction that they are a valuable part of this whole spiritual movement, this change. And so I think, Betty, that we, hopefully give people permission to express themselves spiritually. And that is a key that unlocks, it's going to unlock the peace of the world.
I think that's true, but I also think the question is, how do we follow up afterward? And all I'm saying is that we don't, that we should have some kind of a workshop. Also, these programs are a lot of fun because Noel does some great sing-along stuff, and he gets people laughing and clapping, and it's not just a boring lecture. It's really, it moves nicely between word and song, and I think that people can learn both those ways. They can learn through the music and they can learn through the words. Mm-hmm. I think that it's both work together.
Great. I would think that people who come to it would understand the many candles piece of it. Do you ever get resistance to the one flame idea? That
one light.
The one light, rather. Yeah.
Okay. No, we don't. I think that's because we're preaching to the choir. I mean, the people who come are already in our camp, so to speak. So no, I did get one message, one email message a long time ago, specifically saying Jesus. That quote in the Bible, it says, Jesus said, "No one comes to the Father except me." And I answered it, but they never wrote back. So that was the only comment of that kind that I have ever gotten.
And have you had any reaction from the United Church of Christ officials? Are they supportive? It's a very progressive church for the most part, I know.
It is. No, I don't have anything to do with them at all. I've never heard anything negative or positive, but I would assume that they would like it.
Good. I want to thank you both for taking the time to come on with us today. I've certainly been very inspired, and please, I'd certainly, and I'm sure I'm speaking for Phil, if we can help you on what you're doing in any way, we would be happy to. And but any final words, and Phil, any final questions for you? Anything you'd like to share with our listeners?
Play some more music.
That's a great.
I think your questions have been excellent, and I think you've covered a lot of ground in a very short period of time. So we thank you for letting us be with you.
And I want to say one last thing. I want to say one last thing, and Phil, go to you.
I have one question for Noel.
Oh, go ahead. And
okay.
Go.
Over the years, I would bet when people find out you're the Paul from Peter, Paul, and Mary, people of a certain age will get very emotional because you were a big part of their youth, and they probably sing to you. Which song is most often sung to you in a restaurant or an airport terminal?
I think you already probably know the answer to that. It's not the song that moved them, but is the song that they remember the most is Puff the Magic Dragon.
Yeah.
They all had an emotional experience during the 60s or during those great political travails, or maybe it was right at the end of the Vietnam War with jet plane. But but the song that they feel that they've got their fingers on, that they share with their kids, Betty and I both roll our eyes at.
Oh yeah.
Right.
The other thing is that we try very hard not to bring the Peter, Paul, and Mary thing into many candles, because that's not the point.
Right.
And frequently when I write up a contract, I tell whoever is going to come to please not use that. I mean, that's not what people are. I mean, it might get people in the door, but it's not what it's about.
Yeah.
Right. One last.
Because
go ahead.
Yeah.
One last comment I'd like to make to our listeners, and that is, please go to onelightmanycandles.org. There's a lot of great text to read there, but most importantly, there's a photo of Noel and Elizabeth, Reverend Elizabeth, and they're holding each other, and there's a smile and a sense of incredible spirituality coming from that picture that I think everybody would enjoy, that really speaks volumes to the work that they're doing. So please, so that's onelightmanycandles.org, and just a great picture of a couple radiating spirituality, in my opinion. So thank you so very much for taking the time to come on today.
That's very kind. Thank you, Phil. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Okay.